One of the biggest lessons that I learned, people always want to ask, or they do ask, how do you quit your job? Like, when do you know you're ready to quit? And I've always had these like three things. Hey, okay, I'll give you, like you said, some metrics, 2 metrics and this other factor or variable on when you're ready to quit.
Jamie Gruber, how are you today, my brother? You're looking fine, looking high and tight. Got the fresh towel out this morning for this interview, and I often make the joke is blade or razor. Has anything changed, my brother?
No. Well, first off, I'm trying to look as scholarly as you. Like I've got the shadow, as do you. But yours is that sort of professorial white shadow, 5 o'clock shadow. You got the polo shirt. I do need to level it up. I do I don't know what they call those, like the Norelco, the circles that shave you kind of thing. I just do that. I'm probably irritating the hell out of my skin, but that's all I do.
Yep.
Every other day or so.
Well, I often make the joke is, if you want to come for good hair grooming tips, you always come to my podcast, right? So. Yeah. Well, the one thing I do when I do shave in the shower, and I make the joke is some of my best thoughts while in the shower is because I don't have anything else to do. I don't have hair to shampoo or any of that kind of stuff. So I actually have a lot of good thinking time. Do you do a lot of your big decisions made in the shower?
No, I showers are in and out for me. Like you said, I haven't used a bottle of shampoo in a decade. So showers are in and out for me. I do a lot of my thinking time in quarterly increments. I do a weekend away, a solo weekend. So I take that time for me over 3 days to really dive deep. Not that I don't think any other time but I've tried all the other hacks, the Keith Cunningham scheduled thinking time every week. And I can't seem to stick to it. But one thing I do is when I book a hotel once a quarter to go think, dive in and get clarity on whatever I'm intending to get clarity on for that weekend. Honestly, that's where I come up with my best thoughts.
Oh, wow. That's great advice. Now, gang, just as an FYI, now Jamie and I are just jumping right into the deep end of the pool here. If the name Jamie Gruber sounds a little bit familiar, if you're on my podcast, if you go back to episode number 62, that's over 100 plus episodes ago. And it was almost exactly 2 years to the month that we recorded the previous episode. And what I wanted to do is, first of all, I wanted to just catch up with Jamie. I wanted to find out what he's going on. He's like one of the most interesting people out there of what he's always got cooking. And more importantly, he, at that time of June 2021, made a huge announcement, made a huge declaration, and made a huge life decision. Now, for those of people that maybe aren't familiar with episode 62, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. But Jamie, what was the Coles Notes of June 2021 for you?
Oh, man. So I had just a couple of months before that had left my day job. So I was an executive with a large insurance company in the States. And after 21 years with that company, bouncing around a little bit, moving up the ladder, making a few $100,000 a year, equity, the whole nine, I made the decision to walk away from it in pursuit of, I would say, what I feel like is purpose, in pursuit of, exploring my gifts, in pursuit of, I guess, optimizing the life that I envisioned myself having if I just lean in and believe in what I think I'm capable of.
Well, I mean, it wasn't podcast and riches, wasn't that you were just leaning into the whole world of just put a podcast out in the world, and all of a sudden hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars in brand deals and all those kind of things would come your way?
No, actually, we're coming up on episode 300. Funny you say that. And I would say, look, there's definitely strategies with monetization, but the growth of a podcast is a lot of work. And I find myself looking at other podcasts going like, wow, man, I want to be at that level. I think of Chris Williamson. I think of, Joe Rogan is an obvious one. Tim Ferriss, some of the other big ones that are out there, Lewis Howes. And what you realize after you take a second and look at what they've done is they've been relevant and big for a couple of years, but they're like on episode 1500, like it is a long-term commitment. Typically, there's always a unicorn. But it is a long-term commitment typically to build a podcast. And we're getting some traction. We're getting some legacy, some, credibility, if you will, out there. So I'm starting to attract bigger and better guests. But yeah, I mean, the podcast is a passion. I see a lot of value in what it is. I think more people should have one. I think we're only at the beginning. I could share this stat, to be honest with you, if it helps, because I know a lot of people like think podcasts are oversaturated, but it's something to the effect of, I think it's like 31% of adults in the United States have listened to at least one podcast episode, or listened to one podcast episode or more. So only a third of the United States market has actually heard a podcast. Contrast that with South Korea. They're over 70%. Now, age demographics and other factors may play in there. But there is a lot of room to grow in the podcasting realm as far as listenership. And even in that respect, the podcast world is so much more than the tried and true, put up a show, try to develop a whole bunch of listeners so that you can monetize those listeners. There's so many other strategies you can implement. I'm not even doing, but that you can, that I've learned about in the podcasting space. I mean, you can make money so many different ways.
Yeah. Well, and just not even monetization aside, one of the things that I find is if I get a really interest in something that I want to learn about, I just find a whole bunch of people that are either have a podcast or been on podcasts. And then I just dive in and I interview them, and I get this wonderful opportunity of sitting down with an hour with somebody who's an expert in the field, and I just ask, sorry if I'm being selfish, I ask my own selfish questions of what I want to learn about. If I want to go learn on YouTube, I go find a YouTube expert and I go, how do you build out your YouTube channel? Please, I'm all ears. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share that with my audience all at the same time, because it's of interest to me too. Okay.
Yeah, there's a great Canadian named Evan Carmichael. Are you familiar with him?
Well, he's got beautiful hair, like a beautiful head of hair, like two people I'm seeing right here. So
he does. I had him at an event. We've become connected. I wouldn't call us, great friends. He's doing bigger things than I am at this point. But I learned from him this notion, what you just described, right? So you can have a podcast where you're inviting on people. Let's call it a business development show. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you have a brand or you have a specialty around, say, capital raising, like you do, Russell, or whatever. I know that's one of the things that you're great at. And so rather than go and try to talk to people about raising capital, which can feel salesy sometimes or whatever, you can invite somebody onto a podcast to talk about their business. And then you talk about their business for an extended period of time. And at a certain point, say 2/3 of the way through the episode, you can state something to the effect of, in capital raising, I've always found that what I do great with is X. How do you do that? That person is either going to respond with a really, really good answer, or they're going to stumble a little bit on that answer. And that's okay. You just sort of move past it for them. You don't want to make them look silly. But you do that once a week with a target guest, somebody that's a potential client. Once a week, that's 52 touches. Some of those, 15, 20, once you're done recording, you're going to say, hey, go back. What did you say you do again? How do you help people with raising capital? What does that look like? That's a business development show. The audience doesn't even matter whether you have one or not. Your target audience is your guest who's on a podcast. Not that you're trying to trick them, but it is a podcast you're going to release, and there's an audience out there that's going to listen to it. But you're talking to them about them, letting them tell their story, explaining what you do, and asking them a question in that realm. And if it's a matter of you throwing out the reel and they come in, more power to you. Yeah, that's another strategy in podcasting I've learned.
I hear you. Oh, and Jamie. Oh, brother. Woo!
I was waiting for these.
Well,
and I need bombs.
Bombs are raining left, right, and center here. So often I've had people that have been repeat guests or people looking for, well, how many, Russ? I need lots of bombs here because I have to make sure I should have a little check mark at every time you get one or another one goes on there. It's a competition, right?
I got it in my head right now. I know how many I've got so far, and I'll be counting for the rest of the time we're together.
Okay, good. I 100% agree. And then even another strategy that I use, and it happened by accident in many cases, was, so like I have a certain area where I like to invest in it. And I've done my own research till the cows came home. I've been doing this for 23 years. I know when I see an opportunity, when it's starting to form in an area. But after a while, maybe some people just tune you out. That's just Russ saying maybe he's got an investment to sell there or something like that. I go, no, gang, this is what I'm seeing. So what I went out and I found other experts that to tell the same story, and it's not coming from me anymore. It's coming from a research expert. It's coming from an economist. It's coming from the economic development officer. It's coming from this other person that said the exact same thing I've been saying for 2 years. And then all of a sudden now people go, oh, well, it must be true now because it was somebody else that was saying it. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
And you just find something. And I encourage people all the time. Like, for example, if you want to invest in, let's pick an area, Cleveland, Ohio, pick somebody who's bought 100 places in Cleveland, Ohio. Pick the mayor of Cleveland. Pick the economic development officer. Pick the chamber of commerce. Pick a whole bunch of things. And you can have literally a 5 to 10 part video series of doing a podcast on just why Cleveland, Ohio is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And oh, lo and behold, you have an investable opportunity in Cleveland, Ohio, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. There is a lot of power in the medium. It's more than just put up podcast and hope you become Joe Rogan. I mean, that is obviously would be amazing, but there's so many different ways that you can leverage a podcast. And if nothing else, you just said it. You can add a ton of value through this medium. I look at these as modern day business cards podcast, right? Like nobody hands out business cards anymore. And in order to do something like raise capital, put together a deal or whatever, you need people to know, like, and trust you. And that often takes 6+ touches for that to happen. So I've learned my downline through the podcast, I've seen this happen is, hey, I found you on the podcast. You were really interesting. I like your podcast. I like how you interview people. That led to me wanting to jump into your community. So I joined your community. And then now I'm leveraging what I've learned in your community to build myself some capital. I've got this money I got to invest. Where do I invest? Oh, well, I know you. I like you. I've been listening to you and I've been part of your community. So I'm going to invest my money with you. And I can point to, multiple people, one of which just put, $500,000 in 2 deals in that exact pipeline. Podcast into my community and then said, hey, you know what? I've got access to funds that I invest and I'd like to invest it with you because I know, like, and trust you. So there's a lot of benefit to putting yourself out there and sharing through this medium.
No, I 100% agree. I had somebody, it's funny, I can't seem to find where this stat is anymore. I think they've changed the analytics a little bit, but I had once a podcast consultant that told me on average over a 60-day period, my average listener listens just shy of 4 hours over 60 days to my podcast. Oh, wow. And I go, is that good? He goes, Russ, almost 3-4 hours of them listening to you. Some people don't even talk to their spouses that much in a 2-month period. And I go, okay, well, but then he said another thing that was just nailed the point home for me was a lot of people they listen to with earbuds in while they're doing something else. And that is a very intimate listening experience. Like, literally, you're in somebody's ears. And if they're spending 4 hours every 2 months with you of that is a very, he said 2 things. It goes, number one, that is a relationship you need to always honor, cherish, be grateful for, never take advantage of. And number 2, that's actually huge if you can get that. Even if you don't have a large listenership, if you have a deep listenership that goes into everything, you have a very viable business as well.
No, that makes total sense. Yeah, we're always shooting for the bigger number. How many downloads we can get, the most downloads, the most listens. But you're right. I've had this experience since Tribe of Millionaires is part of the GoBundance community. My podcast is the sort of the marketing front of this mastermind group. And I've been at events for GoBundance, and there's about 1,000 members of GoBundance or so. So I don't know everybody. But I'll go to the gym at 5 or 6 in the morning. And inevitably, almost every time this happens, somebody comes over, like in mid-workout, like, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I'm literally like, you're in my ear, right? It's so trippy. You're right here right now, and then you're right there right now. It's so cool. And then we, strikes up a good. But you're right. It is very intimate. It's like, oh my God, it's like I didn't know you were real. I thought you were only here, and this voice in my head, so to speak. So That's very cool. I like that. Congrats to you too, brother. That's amazing.
I'm the one thing that somebody told me, the same consultant told me when I got started, was that if I'm going to do it, make sure that I commit at least 3 years. It has to be, if you're not prepared to put 3 years in, don't do it. Like, don't even bother starting. And I'm proud to say this July 2nd of this year, 2023, will be 3 years. And it snuck up on me. I'm going to have to, and then I said after 3 years, I'm going to reiterate and figure out what's the next step and where we take it.
But you're like
next.
2 weeks from that. So do you have a sense of what or is this like the second to last episode of the Russell Westcott podcast?
It's it. We're done after this, as we end on a high note, brother. That's it. No, I'm not sure. Here's the thing is, I finally, here's a revelation. After 3 years of doing this, and it'll be in 170 episodes by then, I finally have gotten down to a workflow that just is manageable. Like, it honestly, it takes just a whole pile of time of just the process to figure out the process before you reiterate and take it up to the next level, right?
That's a great point. So I'm curious, and in a week, you release one episode?
It's on average little more than one a week, but that's typically over the 3 years. It'll be one a week. Yes,
one a week. Okay.
Yeah.
And the time in and the time out, you've got that systematized down. So outside of recording right now for an hour, how much time are you spending on the podcast? That's from editing to whatever, pulling in guests, the whole nine.
Well, for example, let's take this example for you and I. It just literally was a text message back and forth. Are you down to do another one? So it didn't take much time for that. We scheduled something. I have an automated process for the appointment, the scheduling, Zooms. I try to get my recording pretty dialed in that when I'm done, let's say we're done in an hour and 20 minutes, half an hour later, I could have a finished episode to go online in a half an hour later. So potentially getting down to, on a one-person show, doing most of the work, could get it under 2 hours per episode.
Total. Episode recording, everything, 2 hours.
Yeah. Now, a lot of that happens that depend, I'm very blessed to have a wonderful person with you, that you have good audio and a good microphone and you're doing things. So the post-editing process will be really quite easy. Sometimes some people's is holy macaroni. We have to, the team or myself have to put an awful lot of processing in to make something sound reasonably good. You have intros and outros and bumpers and maybe a tip that goes in the middle, and you have just kind of a workflow. Yeah, I potentially could get it into under 2 to 3 hours, including recording.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So the reason I wanted to ask you that is, I know we're going to talk more about other topics, but this is a passion point of mine. There's so many ways to do this. Like for me personally, that to me would be, honestly, it's depending on what you want to be and what you identify as. So if somebody listening is saying, I really like this podcasting thing, like how do I make a go of it? There's two different ways, right? So Russell, what you're doing is you're using the podcast as a way to serve an audience you've built through a community and course and curriculum that you've created over time, right? Tell me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's a fairly...
Well, that is 100% that is, but the more deeper intention is a purpose. And the purpose is that I've been blessed by amazing mentors and guides and coaches throughout my life. It's my obligation to share what I've learned and people who I know, and my, pardon the old term, a Rolodex of people who I know. It's my obligation to share that with the next generation of people coming along.
That's a better way to lead in. You're right. Absolutely. And I agree with you. You don't hit 3 years of recording episodes if you don't feel like you're delivering something for people. Whether or not you are, you don't know, but you don't do this that long if it doesn't speak to something inside of you. But I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. And this is what I just wanted to speak to. So I am probably, 10 to 30 hours a week into each episode. I do 2 episodes a week. One of them is a little bit more systematized down. There's certain questions. It's kind of a member profile. But the other episode, the guest profile that I go for is, Pro Bowl athlete, influencer, New York Times bestseller. So for instance, I'm interviewing a guy named Sebastian Junger tomorrow. He's written a bunch of books, one of which is called A Perfect Storm, Mark Wahlberg movie from years and years ago. So he wrote that book and he's written a bunch of books since then. But for a guest like that, I'm reading 2 to 3 books. I'm listening to a couple of TED Talks. I'm going to podcasts or interviews that he's been on. He's been on Rogan. He's been on some other ones that I'll listen in on. So, right there, the Joe Rogan is a 2-hour commitment of time. Maybe with double speed, I get it down to an hour and a half or so. But the point is, like, you can do this so many different ways. That's what I love about podcasting. It's like going to Vegas. People think gambling is Vegas, right? Just like people think, there's so many ways to do Vegas. I don't gamble when I go to Vegas. I go to Vegas. What I do is we go to dinners, we do the clubs, we do the pools. We might go do a show. You can go do all the mafia tours and the pawn shop tours. You can go out and do the outdoorsy stuff, right? Like, there's so many different ways that you can do something like a Vegas. And it really is a matter of who are you and what lights you up. You go do that. And it's the same thing in the podcasting space. Like, I love doing the work and the research. But for a lot of people, they're saying, I don't mind doing that. But what I want to do is what you just said. I want to bring in people in my niche that are interesting, that I could deliver a great product to. And there's ways of doing that in concert with your business, which you're doing, that are of high value, and you could do it efficiently and effectively. I could probably still gain some efficiency. I'm not the best with efficiency, but I don't know. I just thought that was a great discussion.
A little bit of the intersection that I'm at right now, and that's kind of at that 3-year mark of that I have to give a consideration is, do I want to invest the 10 to 30 hours a week into it? And don't say there's nothing wrong with that. Or do I want to keep it what it's at?
Yeah.
And I'm having, the intersection I'm having is a little bit of, I have some investment opportunities that have just represented to me that I haven't seen in 20 years of doing this. And I'd be a fool not to take advantage of it. And that's why I'm just trying to fill the boat as much as I can. And I have to just sit there and go, all these other things have to fit within my investing, right? Because that's first and foremost, I'm a real estate investor and I eat what I cook. And I'm also a coach and a podcaster, but at the same time, you have to eat what you cook in order to have in order to have the chops to be able to share with what you're with everybody else. You have to be able to do it at the same time.
Credibility.
Yeah.
100%. No, completely agree.
Well, we're going to come back to the podcasting a little bit more at the end because you've had such incredible guests, and I want to talk a little bit about maybe some of the lessons you've learned from some of them, or maybe how you've brought people on. But we're going to circle back to our original start of the conversation. But before we do, did I read something correct that you've been on an all meat diet for the last 40, 70 days or something ridiculous like that?
A little over 40 now. Yeah, call it carnivore. It's not necessarily all meat.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well,
the
lion diet.
I posted,
Yep.
I've been only eating meat, just to simplify, right? But it is technically carnivore. So animal products, so eggs, butter, meats, chickens, chicken, I should say, shrimp, seafood, you can eat that sort of stuff. But my daily diet, for the most part, has been 3 to 4 eggs in the morning, a ribeye for lunch, and some other meat for dinner. Like it could be another ribeye, could be a burger patty, something like that. So yeah, I've been doing that for about 40, 45 days, and I'm just now starting to kind of tweak and play with it a little bit, but it's been interesting.
What have the results been?
So it's funny. This is such a great lesson in entrepreneurship for me, and I posted about this, hoping to share the entrepreneurial lesson, but it became a vegan versus carnivore debate, which I guess is to be expected. But the lessons I learned were this: I've had these objectives for a while, these sort of fringe objectives that I've wanted to achieve. It's like, man, I got this stubborn 5 to 7 pounds. This last 5 to 7 pounds, I feel like I'm away from my ideal weight. Just want to drop that. Everybody knows you can drop a lot of weight when you're heavier. I've done that in the past, but when you get down to that last few pounds, it's a little harder. But I wanted to drop those. I wanted my energy to be up. I didn't want to crash the up to the down. I didn't want to have to crave coffee or a pre-workout supplement in the morning. I just wanted to have energy, right? I wanted to keep my energy up, lose the weight, and I wanted to build some muscle, and the other parts of it I've always said is I'd love to remove sugar and just processed foods. If I could just get rid of sugar or whatever. And what I learned was that I was always operating on multiple plans for multiple different objectives. And when I would say something like, okay, I can eat everything except sugar, the reticular activating system in my brain doesn't hear the modifier, it just hears sugar. It's like an echo, right? It's like, I want to eat everything but sugar, 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 sugar. And that's all I was looking for. It felt like I ate more sugar every time I set the intention not to eat sugar. I hope that makes sense. So when I said to myself, all right, look, I've learned of this carnivore diet. I had some guests on, like you said, from the podcast. I learned a lot about it. I did a lot of reading. I listened to a few different episodes of different podcasts about it. And I told myself, all right, only meats, only animal products. So not sugar. Instead, it's only meats and animal products. And by zeroing in on this very narrow focus of what I can eat, one, I didn't crave the other stuff. Not really. I mean, I'm sure if I saw a cake, oh, it looks good, but it wasn't the craving and the feeling I had before when I was saying not sugar, because I told my brain and everything I am that I'm only eating these things. It was really easy not to eat everything else as opposed to focusing on everything and then just not eating this. And all of the results that I sought, I lost 7 pounds. I've gained muscle. I have more energy, ridiculous energy. I'm trying to keep my cadence slow right now for the purposes of digesting this podcast, but it doesn't stop. In fact, it can impede my sleep. My energy has been ridiculous starting around day 12 of this diet, and I can explain why if you need me to. I haven't eaten any sugar. I haven't had any processed foods. All of the things that I set all these little plans on, and I tried to move the needle and stay kind of on the fringe and take care of these things, all went away with extreme focus on one objective. That's what I really got from the carnivore diet more than anything, is the understanding of Pareto's principle in depth, that 20% of your actions garner 80% of your results. When I, in this realm, was the exact opposite. I was taking 80% actions that were getting me 20% results. And it's an incredible feeling to say, wow, I've done this diet and here's the results of it. I'm still monitoring blood work and all of that. I mean, I might come off of it in a month. I don't know. But the point is, I was able to focus in, not cheat at all, stay on this diet. I love meat. I'll respond to vegans if you need me to in a second too. So it hasn't gotten old for me. I can eat some chicken or whatever if I feel like meat is getting, or steak is getting a little bit old. But overall, that's the bigger lesson I got, was with extreme focus come the results that you want. And I'm really now trying to apply that in my day life, in my day-to-day life, in my business.
Wow. You've taken the Pareto principle of 20% produce 80%, and then you actually drilled down into the 20% and took the 20% of the 20% and the 20%, you came up with one thing within your health optimization, energy, weight, those kind of things too. So it's just, wow. That's huge. Hang on a sec. What am I doing? Sleeping at the switch here, my brother. Sleeping at the switch.
Light it up.
Light
number
it.
2?
Yes, number 2.
I got
Dos.
Yes, very good.
So you also, when you made that decision in 2021, no, sorry, I'm going to close the loop. You did come back, vegans. I'm going to talk about that as well. And have you had some negativity around what you've shared with people as well?
Yeah, and honestly, it gives me even more clarity on who I am and what I'm trying to do and who I'm becoming as an entrepreneur. But yeah, I mean, the inundation of emails and posts and text and DMs or whatever from the vegans out there about what I'm doing and being on a carnivore diet being unhealthy for me. I really do. I love the self-righteous aspect of this, especially. It's concern for my health. It's concern for my health, Russell. When what I really learned is these folks are coming at me with different agendas, right? So concern for my health, if there's somebody out there that truly has that concern for my health, I haven't heard from them. What I have heard from, though, are people that are activists around animal cruelty, which I get, are activists around environmental issues that they feel are driven by the carnivore diet. It blows my mind. It stokes my inner defiance. I actually just wrote a newsletter. Like, somewhere buried deep inside of me is sort of an anarchist meets an insult comic, right? Like, that's authentic me. And this vegan thing is bringing it out of me. I've learned that there are 2 types of people in the world. There are those who need you to comply with their worldview, otherwise you're not as good as them. And there's those that say, leave me the F alone, you do you. I tend to go with that camp. I tend to go on this side of things. And I've noticed that in the world of food, the vegan is more the one who needs you to comply, and the carnivore is more the one that says, leave me the F alone. But let me present this to the vegans. May I?
Please do.
If there's one grass-fed cow that I eat, that animal is raised to be slaughtered, right? And that grass-fed cow, unless it steps on a snail, is only dying. It's the only animal that's going to die. And that one cow could feed me for a year and a half. A year and a half could feed me if I froze the meat and all of that stuff, right? One cow. Contrast that with one salad sitting on somebody's table right now, where a rototiller went through and churned up every turtle, shrew, mole, salamander, the things you don't care about, killed all of them so that you could eat a few leafy greens and some hummus or whatever the hell it is you eat, right? This idea, and it goes through everything. Oh, electric cars are better. Are they, or are they when they're manufactured? Are they as dirty as it is to manufacture a gas-powered automobile? Like, this idea that there's an outcome that is so perfect that it has zero consequence or zero malady whatsoever associated with it is absolutely ludicrous. And I'm finding with my vegan friends out there, and I love you all, I love most of you, I'm finding with my vegan friends out there that they're blind to this idea, and instead they want to push me away from meat, not because of my health, but because they perceive what I'm doing to be in some way, shape, or form against an activist slant around the environment or animal cruelty or whatever it might be. Cows are going to fart. Sorry, they go into the environment. We have methane. It is what it is. But my vegan friends have definitely opened up something in me. But what's great is it's allowing some authenticity to come out, because at the end of the day, I've noticed about me that I've been sort of careful to stay within these walls. Don't want to be canceled by anybody. Don't want to offend. Don't want to do any of that stuff. And you know what? It's inauthentic. And one of the 3 human needs that we have is to be authentic. One, we want to be competent in what we do. We want to be authentic. And we need to have a connection with a community. Those are the 3 things human beings need, right? So my authenticity accelerated significantly quitting my day job. No doubt about it. But I'm at a point in time where I do feel like I could take it another level. And I want to be thankful to my vegan friends for maybe opening this up in me a little bit. But that's my feeling about the responses I've got. Every one of them start with, I don't want to be that vegan, but I'm going to be that vegan. So it's been a very interesting time for me. Love you, vegans.
Yeah.
Love you.
Well, it's interesting is sometimes everybody just wants everything to be so binary. Either it's on or it's off. It's good or it's bad. And maybe that's just how people, see things, and that's how people can feel, that wholeness on things, that there has to be, if what I do is good, then the person who does the opposite is bad. And gang, these things don't have to live in isolation. You can have multiple things occur at the same time, and it can still all come out, and it still could all be good all 100%. At the same time.
You can stand on both sides of any issue and see both sides of it. I understand why vegans are vegans. I get it. I understand the health benefits of it. There's also a lot of studies done on how meat is not as dangerous as we once said. Anybody would admit that saturated fat today is not held in the same way as it was 20 years ago. Cholesterol research continues to evolve on whether or not cholesterol is truly bad or just kind of a byproduct of who we are. There's a lot of stuff that evolves. Vaccines. Come on. 3 years ago, the vaccine was, if you don't get it today, a lot of people are regretting getting it, So there's always evolution on positions. And when people just anchor in on one, no matter what side, carnivore, this, that, or the other, that's okay. But when you go after others for not also seeing your worldview in the way that it is and aligning with it and saying, yes, I am with you, that's where I have a problem.
Yeah. Well, and we're recording this right during a time when if anybody's been on Twitter, and I'm going to date this when we're recording it, but if anybody's ever been on Twitter of late, there's a big storm brewing with Joe Rogan, and he had Robert
Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy Jr. on there, and then all of a sudden it's just opened up a whole can of worms. And
it needed to be. The can needed to be open. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
It did. And they were sitting there going, well, let's have a debate about it. Let's get on and let's have a conversation. And I think the pot's up to like $2.6 million pot to charity to come on and have a debate about it. And here's the thing, gang, is that somebody doesn't have to be wrong and somebody doesn't have to be right. But I think it's beneficial to at least have the conversation about it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to make sure this is relatable, right? Like, this isn't a political show. I know that I'm not trying to get political. The point I'm making is simply when you relate it to the world of entrepreneurship. In my space, entrepreneurship includes branding, yours as well. Mm-hmm. And branding comes with making sure that you are being, I guess, authentic and real to the core audience that you have. It's the idea that you are going to attract as much as you are going to repel, but you staying in the safe middle on what you feel, what you think, what you believe, what you think is best for your audience or the people that have been following you. That's not the best and highest use of you as an entrepreneur. That's not the best and highest use of you as a brand.
Yep.
So that's how I relate that discussion point. I know it was like maybe a left-right rant.
No, I get it. But, just a little closer to home here, and this is something you're very well aware of as well, is right now in more so in probably in the US, I don't follow as close as I do in Canada, but within Canada, landlords and people I call them rental housing providers as a better term to use, better language.
RHPs.
Rental housing providers are getting a bad rep out there, and they're being blamed for unaffordability of rents, and they're getting blamed for all these kind of things. And somebody who's taken an awful lot of risk to do this is becoming a villain in this case as well. And I just read a report today that talked about, and they did a case study on, I think it was in Holland, I might get it wrong where it was, that they literally made renting illegal. They made it illegal that somebody could not rent something out. And then they did a study on it, and they found out that rents did not go down. As a matter of fact, rents went up because nobody was buying the housing to then rent to other people. So the supply of housing was lower, and there was actually fewer people. So the price of housing, the price of rentals went up over a period of time as well. So
thank God for Holland doing that and putting it out there. Honestly, thank God a larger nation like a Canada, or the US, or somewhere in the US didn't think to do that, because that is exactly, you're constraining supply. When you constrain supply, demand goes up. When demand goes up, prices go up. That stuff just drives me nuts.
Yeah. But, first and foremost, one of the reasons how you and I met, you're a real estate investor. Not first and foremost, there's many things you got your finger in, but you do invest in real estate. You do raise capital for projects. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, so I am going to ask a question, and I am going to circle back to our original conversation. So when you left your work I don't think you would announce that you were also moving at the same time too, but you've left your job and you actually left the country in a lot of respects. So maybe fill that story in a little bit for everybody.
I did. That was a year lag, but before I left, so in order to do something like walk away from a multi-$100,000 a year job with a stay-at-home wife and 2 young kids, you have to have a vision. You got to have something that you're anchored into. And my vision, dumbing it down or condensing it down to a sentence was, I want to create a life where I can travel with my family 3 months plus wherever I want to go. And when you state that and believe that, and you become aligned with that vision, and then you look at your current circumstance and say, it's not possible in my current circumstance, that disconnect happens, right? You kind of break, your identity breaks away and starts going in a different direction. So as I got eventually to the point that I quit my job and then felt my way into what post W-2, which is the US version of, I don't know what it is in Canada, but post job life was all about, I got to a point where it's like, okay, we're 8-9 months in. I'm actually doing all right. I'm actually between what I do with real estate, what I do with the podcast, and sort of the downline of monetization from that. I'm actually doing pretty good here. So maybe time to execute on that idea or that vision of travel 3 months with my family anywhere we want to go. So last January, actually 2 Januaries ago, I guess it would have been 2020. What are we in, 23? So 2022. January 2022. My wife, kids, and I went to the Dominican Republic for a month. Spent a month down here. And my wife originally being from here, we spent half the time at a resort and half the time with some extended family. So she immigrated when she was, 12 to Boston. That's where I met her. So, but she still has a bunch of extended family down here, aunts, uncles, that sort of thing. So once we were here in January and we saw our sons playing with what would be their cousins, and there's a language barrier, but they're still playing and having fun, running around at her uncle's ranch. I was like, what if we did this for a year or a while, we might have said. So come August, so 8 months later, 7 months later, with a lot of thought and planning and everything else, we ended up making the move. We rented our house. We rent our house to call it midterm rental to people who are out of their home for some reason. It could be a fire, insurance loss, flood, something like that. Could be they're having work done on their house for a month or two and they need a place to stay that's fully furnished, Wi-Fi's on, electric and gas are all turned on, all of that stuff. And we've had no vacancy in a year. We're almost a year. In August it'll be. So for us, it was, how do we do this? So we did. We made the move down. We rented a house down here. We put our kids in a local school, in a Montessori school down here in Punta Cana. So that's kind of Punta Cana is like the main tourist hub of the Dominican Republic. And we've done a lot of travel in the country. We've checked a lot of things out. My kids both speak Spanish. We were just in the car coming back from a 7-hour drive yesterday to the northern part of the country. And I recorded it. My 2 kids and my wife were literally having a full conversation in Spanish, which was really cool. I got some of it, but not to the level they do.
They were talking about you, Jamie, by the way.
Probably. When I hear Blanco and Gringo, I know they're talking about
Bronco and Gringo? Is that okay?
Bronco, the white. Yeah, the white.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so now I know you're very big on measurement of metrics and things like that. Like you're one of you and Michael Bugg and the people I know, you guys are track things down to the nth degree, and you have reporting every quarter and stuff like that. So if you were to sit back and now it's almost exactly 2 years for you, what are some of the biggest lessons you've taken away? Of doing this, making this transition in 2 years? And would you consider yourself further ahead, further behind? If you're just being really honest and self-reflection, how's been the process for you so far?
Way further ahead. The way I'm couching that is further ahead than where I thought I might be when I left my job. Doesn't mean I'm, a complete product, never will be, but way further ahead than where I projected I would be. I honestly didn't know that I believed that we could make a move like this and sustain it. To be clear, a move to the Dominican Republic comes with about double the expense per month. Like our expenses went up significantly every month. So this isn't one of these we're living in a shack and we're shopping at the local bodega. We are in an area that charges an 18% sales tax, 10% service charge on all goods. The import costs are pretty high. Our rent on this house is double what our mortgage is. Our cell phone bill is double what it was. Our electric bill is double what it was. So it's an expensive endeavor, and we're doing it. We're doing it, and we're thriving. We're traveling. So way ahead from a financial perspective, way ahead from a mindset perspective. One of the biggest lessons that I learned, people always want to ask, or they do ask, how do you quit your job? When do you know you're ready to quit? And I've always had these like three things. Hey, okay, I'll give you, like you said, some metrics, 2 metrics and this other factor or variable on when you're ready to quit. And I say, when you're at a place when you've saved 6 to 12 months of expenses, you have that in cash, 6 to 12 months of expenses, not your income, but expenses. And you're in a place as well that you're making, say, 50, maybe it's as high as 75% of your expenses in a side hustle or passive income. So maybe you started a real estate portfolio or you bought a car wash or whatever it is. And you can take 50% of your expense load and pay for that with your side hustle income. Those 2 variables plus this one, you're ready to quit. Third one is you have a belief in whatever it is you've created that it can grow. Those are the 3 variables. Very easy. 6 to 12 months expenses saved, half of your expenses paid by passive or side hustle income, and a belief that you can grow what you've created. Where I would go is I would do it like this. Okay, look, have a year saved and have half your expenses paid. But you have to have a belief in what you've created. These 2 are like, if you do them, great. This is the one though. You've got to have a belief in what you're creating. My life post W-2 is not this standard structured day-to-day, week-to-week paycheck type of life. I take payments and big distributions, then I don't see a payment for a while. I think something's going to come in and then it doesn't happen. I think this sale or this community or whatever is going to really blow up and then it doesn't really do that, right? There's so much up and down, but without a strong belief in what I'm doing, being highly competent at, me being highly competent at, me having accountability and being authentic in it, and then having a community of people around me that I feel represent who I'm becoming. Without those variables in place, the savings and the money that I have coming in passively on the side to pay for some expenses, it's way less relevant than I made it in the first 6 months to a year after I left my job. I never had to touch it. I never had to touch my savings. I never had to dip into my passive income or what I was going to amp up. Like I wasn't taking any passive income from my portfolio when I had my job. I didn't need to. I just roll it back into the property. But then I was like, okay, well, I can carve this out to pay myself. And then I never had to. Now, maybe I'm unique. I don't know. But I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who overly lean, who overemphasize the third part I mentioned, a strong belief in what you have created. That part takes care of the other 2. Now, I'm not saying just willy-nilly quit with a big belief. Do your due diligence. That's a lesson I've learned for me. And maybe that's a lesson that you only get once you've proven to yourself that you can actually survive and thrive in a world without your day job. But that's a massive, massive lesson. That belief, I saw this post once. It was like, you got to be crazy to be an entrepreneur. You got to be crazy enough to believe that you're going to get paid this month when you're not going to. You got to be crazy enough to believe that you can beat your bigger competitor when you probably can't. You got to be crazy in so many ways to take a chance on doing your own thing without the cover and the safety of a big company that's going to pay you. So if you don't have that belief, then you're not crazy enough to do it. And I think if I look back and think about my arc of my development as an entrepreneur or somebody outside of his job, that belief is what sustains me. It's not the money in the bank, and it's not whatever side hustle income is coming in.
Oh, ooh-wee. You're working hard there, brother. Working hard.
It's only 3 though. I said 10.
That's wow. We'll get there, right? I can always dub a few in at the end there too, right? So
true.
The power.
You don't like to edit though. You want to be quick to the edit, so I don't want to put more work on you.
Well, no, I'm. Here's the thing: it has nothing to do with how many bombs you're dropping. It's how many I'm asleep at the wheel. I'm sitting there going, I'm just on fire myself, and I'm because here's the thing, I 100% agree. Everybody needs to have that pragmatic. What's the number? What's the cash flow? What's the kind of stuff? And I think your 3 pillars you've broken down is perfect. You have a portion of it as an income going forward, a portion of it as cash in the bank, but more importantly is you have a belief that you can do it and you can come back. Because I remember when we first talked about it, I believe you had said, I could always go back and get a job at the same time. So you fully didn't burn your boats when you got to the island, but in many respects you did you not?
I did. A friend of mine made the point to me that I kept making that point.
Yeah.
He's like, you keep saying that. I could always go back to my job. Like, I get it. You put yourself out there. What if one day you had to go back and get a job? Now you're going to look like a charlatan. Now you're going to look like a big failure. So you're saying, oh, no. If in a year or 6 months or a day from now, I have to go back and get a job, I can say, yeah, but see, look I always said I might. So I'm not a failure because I said I might. But what I was really doing was keeping a foot on first base, right? You can't steal second when your foot's on first. So I kept my foot there as opposed to getting off the bag and then extending my lead a little bit so that I could take second. That was a massive, massive shift for me. And I've stopped that. Now I say it to other people who need to hear it because again, I understand where I was and where I am. And there's people ahead of me that say things that sound crazy to me, but one day I'll catch up to them and that'll make sense to me at that point. But for somebody who's at the job, when I say to them, okay, can you get your job back? And they say, yeah, I can. Okay. So the worst case scenario is you quit, doesn't work, and you got to go get your job back. Yeah, it's worst case scenario. Cool. So right now you're living your worst case scenario. That twists people's minds, right? Like, holy crap, my life is my worst case scenario. That's a way that I try to get people around the notion, but I leave out there for them. You can always get your job back. You can always go get it back or something close to it, a step down, but you'll be okay.
Yep. Yeah.
But I don't know if I'm employable anymore.
Everybody has a different risk profile and a risk tolerance. On Saturday, some people go skydiving and some people knit, right? Crochet, right? So everybody has a different risk profile. And I often tell people is there ever a right time to potentially do it? The right time comes down to the following. Either you have a moment of desperation or you have a moment of inspiration. And more people will take more action based upon desperation than they will with inspiration. But I'd say the really powerful way is that you have an inspiring, inspirational moment and then you're all in. That's a very powerful way. But the truth of the matter is more people actually make it because they've gone in desperation mode. And
1,000%. I've had 2 people message me, I don't know, in the last year or so, that they got fired from their job unexpectedly. And then within like 3 months, one of them made their entire year's salary in like sales transactions on when they just said, I got to gather myself and find another way. They did some sort of independent sales role and they made their entire prior year's salary 3 months later selling something. Like the other person, not quite that level, but they said the same thing. Like, yeah, I was thrown in the water and I figured out a way to swim. And I agree with you. Desperation is definitely, I think, a bigger motivator. My goal, my brand, everything I talk about right now is hopefully on the other side of that. It's providing moments like I just did, saying you're living your worst case, some sort of inspiration to get you at least moving toward, whoa, okay, that shifted me. Doesn't mean you're going to quit tomorrow, but that little shift, that little point in a different direction starts you down another path. So in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, you're down a better path for you, hopefully, than if you just stayed with where you are going right now.
Wow. Ooh-wee. That's incredible. So, hang on. Getting the wrong. And I can do all that with no hands too, by the way. So.
Love it.
I actually, I just got some new foot pedals. I got these, have you ever heard of Elgato foot pedals?
Yeah.
I can actually do a lot of these changing. See, look, I can change this scene here, and I can change this scene without using my hands. So.
Impressive.
However, my I'm sitting there going, geez, my feet kind of stink here today. So it's like
that works.
Okay, so look, within the context of real estate, what do you do? What's kind of I know it's not your full gig now, and you're more so of on the raising of capital for funds and projects, and you're essentially attracting capital, tying capital to projects in
marketing. So this is, again, I love this part of the journey in terms of people that are looking to quit their job. Not to make this whole show about that, but when I left my job, the idea was I was buying real estate. I bought a couple of duplexes, I birded them, and then I stepped up to multifamily, like a 16 unit and then a 22 unit, and that was the plan. And what I learned along the way that I can admit today or shortly after, but struggled to admit back then, was I hate operations. I hate acquisitions. I don't like any of that process. I do like the capital raising, investor relations part of the business. I enjoy that. It's an interrelational sort of, or a relational part of that business. I loved hosting a mastermind group. I love hosting a networking group, a local meetup, all of that stuff. Like that's the part in real estate that I was really good at. So flash forward, I mentioned one of the things you need is a community that supports you. I meet a guy that is a prominent syndicator in the States, buys, kind of what I was buying, distressed, not too big, between say 20 and 80 unit multifamily properties, value add strategy, and he syndicates these. And he says, hey, listen, man, appreciate how you show up, your energy, the way you connect people and all of that. Right now, with a $200 million portfolio, it's me and one other guy. and we could really use that investor relations marketing type of presence. Do you mind giving up what you're doing and come be a general partner with us in a company called Quantum Capital? And I was like, all day. So wait. I can put down operations and acquisitions. Like, yeah, we got a guy for that. That's Nick. Cool. And I just got to come in and market what we do with Quantum, if I believe in it, and I did, and I'll explain why in a moment. Market what we do, talk to investors, raise capital for projects that I believe in and I put my own capital in. Yeah, that's a role in real estate that supports me and who I am way, way better than, being the guy that's trying to do it all. So I think that's something that people need to remember. Two things. One is the pivot is real. If you're saying I'm going to leave my job to do real estate, that could look very different in version 6.5 or 8.5 than whatever you perceive version 1.0 to do. And it's okay, but we don't give ourselves permission to make that pivot when we're 35, 40, 45 years old. It's like, I went to school for 17 years and then I had a job for 20 years. I got to figure out the next 20 years. It's like, no, the pace of change and the pace of growth that happens when you're outside of those two institutions is much more abundantly faster than what you're used to. So you're going to pivot. And if you're worried about somebody saying, oh my God, you're all over the place, then you got to get over that. But that was what held me back for a long time. So you're going to pivot. That's one aspect. The second is I believe there are three different ways or three different types of people that can add value in a real estate business. You have the underwriter, you have the connector, and you have the integrator. So you have the integrator, the connector, and the underwriter. If you're any of those three, the underwriter being somebody who just loves spreadsheets, in them all day, optimizes them, goes home from work and searches Edmunds.com for 4 months to find the right car. That's your analyzer, right? Put that person in, let them underwrite the hell out of deals, okay? That is a valuable piece of a general partnership team. You could stay there. You don't have to talk to people. Stay in that lane. Or you're an integrator. You're somebody who's a field general. Like, I don't think big visions, but you tell me your vision. I could line the soldiers up on the field and I could put that attack plan in place and get it done. That is an incredible skill in any business, notwithstanding a real estate business. You have a big visionary guy who wants to build this sort of portfolio and do it in these markets. You being the integrator mind saying, well, here's how I would do that. That is an incredible skill. So that is a way you can add value in real estate. Or there's the connector. That's me. This is the person who can be on podcasts and phone calls all day and then go to a networking event and a date with his wife until midnight tonight and then get up tomorrow and do it all again. I don't lose energy when it comes to interaction. I do lose energy when it comes to analyzing. The analyzer doesn't lose energy. Analyzing does lose energy, needs to get a break if they're in a networking environment. Not that you can't do these things, but it just doesn't give you the energy. So the other lesson in that is you don't have to be all things in a real estate business. Choose what you're great at, be in that lane, find the people or be on a team with other people that are already in place that are great at those other areas, and you form an incredible, incredible real estate team. So that is, and I know you probably have to go, but I can give you a quick overview of why I believe in what we do with Quantum, if it gives you a sense, because I think there's some
hang on.
and,
before you do that, do you need to catch a breath there? You're too on
I never
fire.
knew.
Yeah. Oh,
I told you, my energy is ridiculous on this diet. Ridiculous.
Holy moly! So please, I'm very interested. I'm a geek when it comes to structures and the way people raise capital for projects and stuff like that. Because success leaves clues, obviously, right? So that's one of the things I think we're in alignment to this as well. And that one really hit home for me, that last little gang. If you've been listening to this and you need to rewind that again, please rewind that and put that on repeat until it's drilled into your head. So
yeah, no, I truly believe that you have to find your role in real estate. Not one person is everything, all things to everybody. But as far as, what I see in the real estate market right now, why I believe in what we're doing with Quantum, I'll be very honest with you. I think it all comes down for those that we're going into in June of 2023, we're going into turbulent times, or maybe we're already in the middle of them. We're already in the middle of them. Rates are up. You're seeing distress in the multifamily market, especially in the commercial market, especially in cities like San Francisco and others where there's massive office vacancy. God knows what's going to happen when those office leases that are already empty, but they're paying them, actually stop being paid, but that's for another day. It all comes down to debt terms, in my opinion. The better and more conservative the debt terms, the better and more sure you are of getting a return. Too many people, and I've seen this happen in capital raising, I'll talk to them about a deal, and it's got a 15 to 17 IRR, maybe a 1.8 equity multiple, and it's going to return you a 7 to 8% or 7 to 9% cash on cash over a 6-year hold. What they'll say is, I got a Broadway play that's getting me a 25 IRR. Okay, great. But do you understand the variability and the uncertainty of a soft asset like a Broadway play. That's a real example, by the way. They'll look at IRR or even a multifamily property. Oh, look at the IRR. But what is the underlying debt? What is the underlying debt? I believe there are two things that you need to have in place in order to feel really confident in a deal. And I'm so glad that this market is creating desire around boring returns again. 15 IRR, 16 IRR is a great IRR. 7 to 9% cash on cash is excellent. It's good. You could do better, I'm sure. You can do a little worse, but these are good metrics, and they're probably a very sound investment. So one, got to be low loan to value. Got to be low loan to value. So if you are anything over, let's say 70, I think that's risky. I think 65 is better. With Quantum, we're about at a 58% loan to value, even if you compress the values of real estate today. So we're about 58% loan to value. Second is, what is the term of your debt? If you're in the commercial space, often, I think it's the same in Canada, you get an amortization schedule for 30 years or 25 years, but the debt is due way sooner. And what has happened in the last 2-3 years is people are taking on high loan to value, short-term debt at 3% with 2 years before the whole thing is due. Works great from 2014 to 2022. Works excellent, right? You could get away with that if you're in that range. You look like a genius because you're turning these properties, values are going up, you're giving investors their return, high on the hog. But in this environment, when you get caught, you get caught. 3,200 units repossessed in Houston recently because people are taking on short-term debt, meaning a 1 to 2 year term with high loan to value. So when values go down, cap rates go up. When values compress, now you've got an asset you need to refinance. You're already fully leveraged to a value that it's not anymore, and you don't have the cash to bring to the table, nor do you have the capital from your investors, nor should you even ask for it in order to get out of that deal. So it goes back to the bank, or you try to sell it at a loss or whatever it might be. So if you've got a deal that's got a 65% loan to value, and it's got a 5 to 10 year term with maybe an optional 5-year extension beyond that, 15 years you can hold the asset, that to me is sexy in this environment.
Right. No, I've had some I was just at a big conference just recently, and some of the bigger players that I know that are buying in primarily in the US are literally just sitting in cash positions right now because they've seen some blood. They haven't seen enough blood to really dive into the water yet.
Look, there's one big Canadian company that right now is I'm invested in them. And I saw what they do. They have a high velocity of money. They churn deals quickly. They invest in the US, Arizona, Texas, so on and so forth. And they recently sent out a newsletter like, we got 4 quadrants of properties. These are pretty good. These we think will hopefully be good. These, eek, and these are done. So they are absolutely in a position right now where they're not doing well because their strategy, and again, I have some money invested in them, so it's not like you're impervious to this, but their strategy is to move the debt quick, move the property quickly, which means they're willing to take on aggressive debt terms. And if you should do that a little bit in your portfolio, but it can't be your entire investment strategy. And if you're raising capital, if you're the one raising capital, man, I just don't want to be sitting on that ride when it ends as their capital raiser.
Yeah, and typically, the one component of all of that is how safe is the cash flow in there, right? Loan to values is one thing, but do you have the cash flow to support the operations? Do you have the 100%. Cash flow to ride out if there's any dips and things like that? And one of the things that we're seeing in some of the markets that I'm investing in, we have so many people moving in, and they're not bringing on houses even close to fast enough to even help to even come close to scratching the surface. It's in a good opportunity right now to be in an affordable rental housing product and a market. Yeah.
Yeah. Our motto at Quantum around investment is not cash flow first. It's location for that reason. You're in a high demand market where there's a shortage, and there's a lot of markets like that. And we invest in submarkets of submarkets that are the ones where everybody wants to be and is going into, because it creates more demand for your product.
Yep. Well, I tell you, you know what? You and I could probably just even have a riff off of that one conversation there, and we could do a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast episode.
I do those now. But they're fun, man.
But I do know you're on Dominican time, right? So it's afternoon, it's happy hour here soon, and I do want to
put it on me. I think you got to pick up your kid or something, don't you?
I want to be respectful of your time.
I'm good, man. Whatever you want.
Okay, so let's go into. You had and I wanted to chat with you, and I'm going to be brutally honest, I did not listen to the episode yet, but you had the person from the Fire Festival. So if any of you are not familiar with Fire Festival, go onto Netflix, find, I think it's called Fire, isn't it? Fyre?
Fyre, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a fascinating tale of essentially fraud in many respects when it comes right down to it. And then that person went to jail, and you had them. Did you like pick them up in a car and you brought them to the studio for the episode, or how did that episode come down? And how did you meet? How did you get the person? And what were some of the key lessons you learned from that?
Almost flew to New York to do a live episode and decided not to. Billy McFarland is his name. You can look up the episode, Tribe of Millionaires, Billy McFarland. You can see it. I do a lot of outreach for interesting guests. And, the podcast is about, the power of community for entrepreneurs and so on. But I tend to allow myself some license to go into issues like this. Like, all right, here's a fraudster, convicted, admitted fraudster. He's out of jail now. What's he up to? It's just interesting, right? It's just interesting. Or I've had, people on the political spectrum come on. I'm trying to do something on the discussion around trans rights right now. I want to get some, maybe even a panel on that to talk about on the podcast. It's anything I'm interested in, kind of Joe Rogan-esque, I guess, in that way. But I do a lot of outreach. Billy McFarland is no different than getting, I mentioned Sebastian Younger, or, some NFL players I've had on, Major League Baseball players I've had on, other New York Times bestselling authors. Who's the one that I just booked recently? I've had Gay Hendricks on. There was another guy.
Yeah, he wrote the Big Leap, which is a fantastic book. Yeah.
Amazing book. Everybody should read that book.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these guests of prominence, I guess you could say, I do a lot of outreach. So the beauty of this is, and I assume you're asking, like, how am I finding Billy and these guests, or just Billy?
Both. Yeah.
Okay.
And then some of the lessons you've learned from some of these prominent guests.
I'll get into that for sure. So I have a flow. When I reach out, first and foremost, I do a lot through Instagram. You have to follow the person. You have to like and engage with their content. Otherwise, your direct message is going to go to their requests bucket. So you got to have some time following, a week, 2 weeks, whatever, and interacting with them a little bit before you can just do this. But what I'll typically do is I'll do kind of like a 4 or 5 part message to them, all in DM, and it'll start with something like, "Hey, my name's Jamie. Fan of what you've done, not so much with Billy, but more like interested in what you in your story.
Please, I want to do a how-to episode on."
Right. And then I'll get specific as to what I mean by that. So if it might be something like, fan of your new book. I loved the part where you talked about X, right? So I'll give them something like, I'm not just saying fan of your book like any spammer, because I do. I read and I look and I listen to podcasts or whatever it might be. Then after that, I'll talk about the request. I'll say, "Hey, I've got this podcast, would love to have you on." And I'll put something in there to build some credibility for the podcast. Typically what I'll do now is I'll look at who they follow, and anybody that they follow that I've had on, I'll mention them. I've had Tom Bilyeu on, I've had Jesse Itzler on, I've had these different people on. So I'll mention that in that next kind of section. And then I'll say something like giving them permission to say no. It's like, "Listen, I completely get if you're too booked up right now, but would love to have, but if you can't, I understand, I'm still a fan." And then lastly, I'll offer them some sort of incentive to come on. So it'll be something like, "Hey, listen, anytime in the next 6 to 12 months that you've got a book or a product coming out, just let me know the best timing or who to get in touch with." And then I'll even say, I'll say, "Hey, listen, I'll put ad spend behind this to guarantee a certain number of listens as well." So I'll do all of these things in like a 3 or 4 paragraph, and I say paragraph, like 2-sentence paragraphs, DM to them. And I get a decent response rate. I should probably track it, but I would say half reply. They say, "Yeah, hey, this sounds great. Let's do it." Or, "Here's my person, connect with them." And now I'm getting to a point where I'll put the feelers out. I might get a no, or they might ghost me. And then they'll come back when they have a product coming out, and they'll say, "Hey, Jamie, would you still like to have so-and-so on Tribe of Millionaires?" So it's like marketing for real estate. It's a broad approach. You got to mail everybody you got to mail 40,000 letters to get 2 deals. It's the same thing. You've got to put out a bunch of feelers to a bunch of different types of guests. But one of them is Seth Godin. Do you know Seth Godin?
Yeah, know very well.
I have his email address.
Sorry, I should say I know. I know of him.
I get it.
And I say I know him because I got a whole bunch of his books on my shelf. So obviously I know him.
So I had a guy on a podcast that's got a great podcast, and he loved my episode because I do a lot of research. So they're like, "Wow, man, like really appreciate that. How can I help you?" And I'll say, "Always looking for amazing guests. Anybody you'd recommend?" And he goes, "You know who's really gettable is Seth Godin." And who was the other? He gave me one more, but he's like, "Seth Godin, man, like here's his email." So I email Seth Godin, and he replies back like lightning. He's like, "Jamie, now's not the right time." I'm like, "No problem, Seth. Let me know. I'll message back when I see something." Message him again. Now's not the right time. Has a book coming out 2 months ago. I see the book. "Hey, Seth, Here's what we've done. We've grown to this size now. We're even way bigger than what we were before. I'll put ad spend behind it. However I can help you promote the book. It's not a good fit. So I get those no's, right? I get those no's. Everything else lines up, right? This is a guy, I told him who referred me, a friend of his who he's been on his podcast. I had the timing down. The size of my show fits as far as, it would add value to him and getting his book out there. But for whatever reason, maybe it's because I messaged him 3 times over a year, he didn't want to do it. And you got to just roll with that. So I didn't get Seth Godin, but I've gotten, Sean Casey, or I've gotten Exhibit, Exhibit was another deal, but I've gotten all these different interesting guests that I've had on. And as you get them, you can leverage those guests to get other guests, and that's where the momentum really starts.
Wow. And when Seth Godin does come on the podcast in a few years from now, when he reaches out to you, then boom.
Well, I talk about vision. My next vision, I just talked to my accountability pod about this. My next vision is to grow such a valuable platform that the biggest names in the industry will be requesting me to be on the podcast to be on my podcast, as opposed to me reaching out. I want the Bobby Kennedys saying, I got to be on Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman, and Jamie Gruber. I got to be on those 3 podcasts. That's my objective for the next 5 years.
Wow. That's awesome. And I 100%. Bringing the fire. And it's funny. I was just having a conversation with a fellow the other day, and he came up and goes, "Oh, I heard you have a podcast." I did a live presentation. I said, "Please subscribe to my podcast." Usually at the end, that's all I ask of anybody. This person comes up, "I want to be a guest in your podcast." And I said, "That's fantastic. I'd love to have you as a guest too. Tell me, what was your favorite episode?" Okay, tell me, what are some of the things you've learned from my podcast over the things? Okay, well, your message, how would that fit within my core philosophy and my core intention of my life and what I want to build my podcast around? But I want to be on your podcast. And I say, well, you got a little homework. And when you come back and you can at least answer those 3 questions, and then you can, deliver something that you can share how would inspire and encourage and inspire and come from a place of love with my audience, which is my core intention. And when you can tell me those kind of things, I would be honored to have you as a guest on my show.
Barrier to entry. Yeah. Smart man. Smart man.
All right, brother. Well, here's the thing is, we could go many different directions, and I know I only did block you off for a little bit of time, and shame on me for not blocking off more. But one of the questions,
man, I'm good.
Okay, but good. So 2 things I want to kind of end off here with is number 1 is I just wanted to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge how you show up. I always acknowledge every time you and I have had a conversation, Jamie, I leave feeling a better person. And I know we don't communicate like every week or every month, but the times that we do interact, I walk away feeling like I could go punch a gorilla. Now, it wouldn't end pretty, but I feel like I can go punch a gorilla if need be, right? And that comes from just how you show up and how you elevate your game to interact with people you talk with. So I just wanted to just acknowledge that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, man. That means a lot.
The last question I'm going to leave you with is, so something I leave with everybody is if somebody's sitting here and they're feeling a little bit stuck, whether it's in the context of real estate or just anything in life in general, somebody just feeling stuck and they just not sure about maybe a next step that's right for them. What's some wise words that you can offer somebody to help them get unstuck and just take that next step that's right?
I would start with getting clarity. I like things in 3s, so I call this my 3 C's. I would start with getting clarity. Understand what it is you're trying to accomplish, not how you're going to accomplish it, but just what's the outcome you want. I mentioned my vision a few years ago was to travel 3 months with my family to any destination, right? That was not by doing this. It was just simply to do that. My new vision I just articulated to you is to create such a valuable platform that the biggest names request to be booked on my show. I don't know how yet. I'll figure out the how along the way. Those are goals, but have something clear and compelling that you are driving toward. So that's the first thing. By the way, to get that, I highly encourage do a solo weekend. Get out, do 3 days on your own. If you want to email me, I'll give you my email at the end. I can send you a PDF on this that'll lay out exactly what to do on a solo weekend. Happy to do it. Second is you have to build confidence in the identity that you're trying to create. So I believe that identity doesn't happen. I'm sorry. I believe that identity happens before the outcome. In other words, you shift your identity and then the result lags. The best example of this for me is having kids. When your wife or girlfriend, or if you are a woman listening, is pregnant, in that moment, your identity shifted. Now, you don't have the baby, so you're not a parent, technically. You don't, if you look at the definition of parent, I've looked it up. You don't have a kid yet, right? But you've got something brewing inside of you that will become a kid. So your identity shifts to parent, dad, mom. And 9 months later, the result lags. So you have to shift your identity to the direction you're trying to go to. Again, clear, compelling vision will help that. Oh, over here, boom, identity shifted. Now you're going down this lane. And now to keep you on the track is the third C, and that's community. If you are surrounded by people who are remember when, and what I mean is that they know who you for who you've been or who you maybe are right now, that's the equivalent of crabs in a barrel. Are you familiar with that reference, Russell?
You
crabs
betcha.
in a barrel?
You betcha.
Okay. Crabs in a barrel, if one tries to crawl out, they all drag them down. Doesn't mean that they're doing that out of spite or hate. They're doing it out of love. Oh my God, what are you trying to do? Keep your job. Stay safe. Don't buy that real estate. My Uncle Tony went bankrupt. That's what remember when friends do. Now, if you've shifted your identity because you've got this clear and compelling vision and you're moving toward and building confidence in what that identity is, then you need a community of imagine when people around you. Those that are representative of who you're becoming, not who you've been. They don't care about who you've been. They don't care about who you are. They see what you've created and what you're trying to create, and they're going to hold you accountable and be there with you every step of the way until you create it. So you got to have clarity. You got to have confidence in your new identity, and you need to have the right community around you.
Oh, wow. Oh, hang on. Ooh, wait. Ooh, wait.
I like the Bob.
I'm
going for him now.
Is that 6 or 7 or? Oh.
I think I'm on 7. Somebody could tell me. Email
Yes.
me.
So if you're watching this on YouTube, go back and put it in the comments below how many that was for Mr.
That's
Jamie Gruber. Well done, my brother. So clarity, confidence, and community are the 3 C's that you just shared there. And I 100% echo that as well. That's fantastic. My brother, it'll probably be another couple more years before we book another podcast and catch up.
Anytime, man.
One of the things I like doing is I like circling back with stories that we tell. Like we told the story back when you just made the decision. Now we're circling back to the next part of the story where you've created an incredible momentum and you have a grander vision. And we're going to circle back again when you're having those great big guests and one of the biggest platforms out there in the world. And then we're going to circle back again because that is, in my opinion, truly inspiring is when we can tell that story over time, because
that's cool.
A commitment to the process and relentless obsessive work towards that process will yield a result. Thank you very much, my friend.
Appreciate you, man.
Okay. Bye for now, everybody. Hey, wait a minute. You're still here. Didn't you know the video is over? You know what? Since you stuck around right to the very end, it's time for a little reward, a little bonus for you. Number 1, make sure you subscribe. There will be a button below here. Hit that subscribe button, bell notification to not miss an upcoming episode. And over here will be a hand-selected playlist and the next video for you to watch to keep your momentum going forward. All right, gang, let's go.